Have you ever wondered how a nation of just 10 million people manages to completely dominate global football? I mean, think about it. We're constantly seeing Portuguese managers leading Europe's absolute biggest clubs. Their players are taking home the highest individual honors, and their domestic teams consistently compete way above their financial weight class. So how exactly does a relatively small country build such a dominant blueprint?
Just to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this influence, let's look at one staggering number: 400 million euros. That is the profit generated purely from player transfers out of Sporting CP's academy alone. It's an absolutely astronomical figure, and it proves this isn't just a matter of random luck or some fleeting golden generation. What we're looking at is the result of a highly refined, systematic approach that produces excellence year after year.
In this explainer, we're going to decode this entire phenomenon by looking at three foundational pillars. 1. Tactics. 2. Talent. And 3. Identity.
Pillar 1, tactics and the periodization method.
To really grasp why these managers are just so incredibly effective, we've got to talk about a guy named Vitor Frade and his concept of tactical periodization. Now, this is a coaching methodology that completely throws out traditional reductionism. You know how historically coaches would chop the game into little pieces? Like you do running for fitness on Tuesday, passing drills for technique on Wednesday, and maybe a chalkboard session for tactics on Thursday. Well, tactical periodization says no way. It insists that every single aspect of the game is deeply, inextricably linked. You literally can't train one piece without the others, because in an actual match, they never happen in isolation.
So instead of breaking practice into isolated drills, this method demands that the tactical, technical, physical, and psychological components are all trained at the exact same time. The tactical dimension is the boss. It coordinates the whole show. You're not just out there running empty sprints to get fit, right? You're doing game-specific exercises that build your physical conditioning, while at the very same time, you're fine-tuning your technical skills and building the mental toughness you need for your team's specific style of play. It's about building a dynamic collective identity where every single drill mirrors the chaos and complexity of a real match.
And we actually see this theory translate into massive real-world success through managers like Bruno Lage. Think back to his time at Wolverhampton Wanderers. He applied this highly interconnected, reactive approach, treating the team as a single living organism, rather than just a bunch of individual attackers and defenders. And the result? He completely solidified their backline and wildly outperformed their budget. Keep in mind, Wolves only had the 14th highest wage bill in the Premier League at the time. This methodology proved that if you have the brain power and the right structure, you can absolutely rival raw spending power. It's a total game changer.
Moving right along to Pillar 2, Talent and Sporting's Holistic Academy.
Now, behind those massive transfer profits and multiple Ballon d'Or winners, guys like Luis Figo and Cristiano Ronaldo, there is a surprisingly human-centric philosophy at play. Take it from Thomas Moraes, the co-general director of the academy. He says, "We believe that if he's a good, well-rounded person, he'll be close to becoming a good player." It is a completely holistic approach. Cultivate a good human being first, and the elite football player will naturally follow. They are literally building character just as much as they're teaching ball control.
Which brings us to a really fascinating contrast. It's a huge paradigm shift compared to top-level senior football. At the senior level, everyone is obsessed with the team result, right? You adhere to the system to win matches. But inside Sporting's academy, the focus is fiercely on the individual. The goal isn't really the final score of some under-15 match. The goal is maximizing daily personal growth and individual differentiation. Coaches are basically acting as mentors. They'll even move a player up an age group just to manufacture the exact kind of adversity that kid needs to grow. It's not about the weekend's trophy, it's about building a long-term masterpiece.
And to maximize that individual spark, the academy does something brilliant. They actively try to recreate the extinct environment of street football. We all know kids play outside way less these days, so Sporting actually built Field 7. It's a dedicated space where formal matches are strictly forbidden. Instead, players are playing foot volley, tech ball, foot tennis. The entire philosophy here is to treat the ball as a friend, not as a problem to be solved. They are reverse engineering the magic, the physical freedom, and the unpredictability of unstructured street play, and injecting it right into a highly structured, multi-million-dollar academy. They've figured out that sometimes to create the most sophisticated players in the world, you just have to let them play.
Which brings us to our final section, Pillar 3, Identity and Debunking the Myth.
So, zooming out to the societal level, we have this fascinating academic paper by Rui Raposo that helps us deconstruct a very pervasive myth regarding the authoritarian Estado Novo regime, which governed Portugal from 1933 to 1974. Now, there's been this common story floating around that Benfica, which is Portugal's most recognizable club, was somehow a favored tool of this dictatorship. But when we actually look at the documented source material, we uncover a totally different reality. One flips this old narrative completely on its head.
The historical record actually shows Benfica pushing back against the regime through some highly symbolic acts. Just look at their stadium inauguration dates. Benfica deliberately chose defiant dates tied to independence and the Republic. They opened Campo Grande on October 5th, which is Republic Day, and Estádio da Luz on December 1st, the restoration of independence. These were constant, very public reminders of a will to fight oppressive forces. Meanwhile, if you look at their rivals, those stadiums were inaugurated on dates directly celebrating the dictatorship, like May 28th.
And it goes deeper than that. There was actually no era of Benfica supremacy during the regime's harshest years, from 1934 to 1959. The titles were pretty evenly split. Sporting won 10, Benfica won 9, and Porto took 5. More tellingly, though, Benfica was subjected to strict censorship. Their original anthem, Avante Benfica, was censored simply because the word Avante had communist associations. The media was literally banned from calling them the Red Team, and the club's leaders and supporters were actively monitored by the political police. So this was clearly an identity forged in resistance, not complicity. Raposo also completely dismantles the famous 3F myth, this idea that the dictatorship used fado music, Fatima, and football to distract the masses. The historical irony here is pretty amazing. The ultra-conservative regime didn't even consider professional football worthy of its traditionalist values in its early decades. They viewed the sport with deep suspicion. Professional football only really took off in Portugal in the 1950s because of its overwhelming grassroots popularity across Europe, not because it was some clever top-down tool created by the state. All of this brings us to a really provocative thought. We started this explainer by looking at massive transfer profits. But when we take a step back and look at the whole picture, the brilliant coaching methodologies, the human-centric academies, the fiercely independent cultural histories, it begs a much broader question. Does a brand's success really rely on a massive budget? Is raw financial wealth the absolute only way to build a dominant football brand?
Well, as we've seen, Portugal proves that you don't necessarily need the biggest budget in the room, as long as you have the right intangible resources. An ISTE thesis investigating this exact dynamic found that intangible assets heavily drive financial and sporting performance in European football. Things like institutional knowledge, cohesive training philosophies, and deep cultural roots, these act as incredibly powerful capital. And a lot of times, they actually outperform raw cash.
Ultimately, Portugal's profound impact on the beautiful game comes down to this deeply cultivated blend. It's innovative coaching that views the game as an interconnected whole. It's holistic development that builds the person first and the player second. And it's a fiercely independent cultural identity. So the next time you see a Portuguese team outsmart a massive financial giant on the pitch, ask yourself, what could your industry achieve if it focused a little less on the budget and a whole lot more on the blueprint?